case, my drug was able to enter the cell and take arsenic out. But as I said, compared to original drug, it is toxic. So I reduced the dose of my drug to an extent that it is totally non-toxic. And then after the first dose, we gave DMSA, the approved drug, because its distribution is extracellular. So my drug was able to bring arsenic out from the intracellular side and was in blood circulation. And once it is in blood circulation, the drug which is already approved was given. Now, in a slide, I will just try to show that how it works. The drug on the top is the one which has been approved by US FDA, it is in the market. But it goes and takes arsenic only from the extracellular side. Extracellular side means blood. It binds with the arsenic, and then it takes out. But it never goes into the intracellular side. So it is not effective in chronic cases. It is only effective in acute cases. Now what happens with the drug which we have developed, it goes both in the extracellular side and also to the intracellular side and takes arsenic out. But the problem was that it is toxic than original drug. So I thought that I should reduce the dose, only it will take more time in removing arsenic from the system, which is quite acceptable because you should not remove arsenic within 2 days because you will be unnecessarily putting unnecessary load on kidneys because kidney is the root of elimination. So to reduce the dose, it will go and take arsenic from the intracellular side. Once it comes into the extracellular side, you will give arsenic. So that is a new strategy which we suggested and which was accepted by WHO, and now it is one strategy which has now been recommended by both WHO and CDC, that combination treatment is the best mode of treating any cases of arsenic. Nanocapsulation is second part, with the last part which perhaps I will touch upon, because nanocapsulation is an advanced technique of nanotechnology. It is now in the market. We have tried once, because what I found that in my case, my drug is not able to cross blood-brain barrier to the extent which I want. Because if arsenic has gone inside your brain, you need a drug to go inside the brain and take arsenic from there. And so far, even DMSA and DMDS are not able to go inside the brain and take. So I thought that perhaps by nano-encapsulating it, which is a technique which I am talking about, is a nanoparticle defined as a subchronic. You all know about it, I don't want to talk about it. Nanosphere is a metric system in which a nano-encapsulation involves forming drug-loaded particles with diameter ranging from. So you need only one, this is what we are talking about, nanosphere and nanocapsule. So you can see that there is a drug which has been in the polymer, the membrane is there outside. Now, what are the advantages of this particular nanocapsulation of the drug is that higher doses can be loaded. You need reduced irritation of drug at site, because if you are giving because you, for even skin irritation, you are encapsulating it, so there will be no irritation because you are encapsulating in a polymer. Greater protection from degrading during storage and after administration, because this is a one problem which you have to face, because most of the drugs get degraded slowly. So this problem can be addressed by nano-encapsulation. I must be very honest and clear before I proceed further. I am not one person who is really very much happy with this new nano-encapsulation or nanotechnology which has come, because rather than bothering much about the toxicity aspect, which Professor Bhatnagar also talked about, we have jumped into so many areas. Perhaps even if you go into the market, now you have started the things which we do not require, perhaps even cosmetics, all nano things have started coming in. Why we require everything? Everything. It can be applied. Nano technology can be applied in certain cases, not in everything. I mean, you go to any institution, even in my own organization, we work on chemical warfare agent and we decontaminate it. So we are using nanoparticles. Many times I have asked that why you need a nanoparticle, nano magnesium oxide, why nano zinc oxide to decontaminate when it is the fuller cell itself is working so nicely. So we have, before you jump into something, but this is one area perhaps I think we have students have to start, and perhaps if IAS University can take up small project on this, perhaps it doesn't require too many things. It can be worked out very nicely. But perhaps a nano-encapsulation, and none of the institution, big institution, perhaps they are working on this particular aspect. Site-specific action. So if I have to deliver my drug in the brain, I don't have to inject here and it will be distributed in liver, kidney, so many parts, and then it will reach brain. By nano-encapsulating, you can specifically deliver the drug at the site where you want it to be delivered. Increase bioavailability of the drug. Because if you are injecting through intramuscular route, so you are injecting through intravenous route, the bioavailability will be less. So if you are encapsulating it by using a polymers or this and that, you can, bioavailability can be increased. Control and sustained release of the drug system can be used for various routes of administration, including nasal. Even now you have seen that even nasal preparation has been prepared. Improve patient's compliance because you are using polymer which is very patient friendly. Need to study nanocapsulation. This is the main reason I am advocating that minimize drug degradation, prevent undesirable side effects, increase drug bioavailability. Nanoparticle carriers can be targeted to the specific cells and location within the body. This is just one example. This is a liquid core, polymer membrane. This is how you prepare, and it's a polymer from matrix, and then you put the drug here, and this is how if you are coating the drug, and then delivering at the site. So this is what I was to talk about. As I said, this is all my work which I have done. I have touched upon a little bit about drug encapsulation also. But this is all related to the drug which I am working on. 34 years only to develop a drug, which perhaps now is in phase 2, and hopefully now it will come in 2 to 3 years time in the market. And that will be perhaps the first drug which will be there in the market from not only from India, from developing countries. And I'm very sure and very confident about it because I have worked so religiously and perhaps I have not touched upon anything which perhaps anybody will come and question me whether you have tried this. All the questions which were there in my mind, perhaps I have tried. And this is exactly what I want the students perhaps to think over it. Choose a topic which you feel that you can bring it to a logical conclusion. So I took this topic in 79 and perhaps it took me long years to bring this. But the passion was there and passion is still there, and I am still passionate about that this drug has to come into the market. So develop that passion, and as I always end my talk with 3 Ds which I always talk about. There are 1 or 2 students sitting in here also of my lab. The discipline is one thing which you have to always, discipline, dedication and devotion, and you have to be devoted to this and choose science only when if you are devoted. And there are many areas perhaps. We published this nano-encapsulated work in nanomedicine. Again, it's one big journal. And the reason was the thinking, we thought something new, innovative. It was not that we have done so much of work in a particular cell or molecular toxicology, this, that. Perhaps by thinking something new, you can publish. And do publish. Never keep something in your there are many people who will come and they say, no, publication. Because even I have heard such type of nasty remarks from seniors. Oh, I think this is the time when I can even share. One senior person, when I was young, and he said, oh no, these research papers are like toilet papers. Oh, for some, it may be a toilet papers, but for me, it is always a guiding force, and this is always your strength. So believe it or not, because my professor in US always told me, even if you have 1 table data in your file, never keep it published. Because you have no right, because it's a criminal injustice if you are doing, because you have done something and you are not sharing it with the scientific fraternity. Do publish and always be passionate about what you are doing. Always, I think I've used this word passion 10-15 times. Because nothing comes unless and until you are passionate about something. With these words, I thank Dr. Srimoit and Dr. Bhatnagar and all the organizers for giving me this honor, perhaps, which I don't know whether I really deserve this honor because I'm like all you people. And then my best wishes to all the youngsters for a very bright future, and the best wishes and my blessings also for a very bright future in science. Do well. And I thank all the seniors who are sitting in front for their passion and for their, again, passion works, for their patience and for listening to something which perhaps I don't know, maybe of their interest or not. But thank you very much for being patient, so patient. And again, I thank everyone for bearing with me for an almost.
Thank you, sir. May I request Professor K.S. Sharma, advisor, the IIS University, to present a token of our appreciation and gratitude to Dr. S.J.S. Flora. Thank you, sir. I now invite Dr. Shrimoy Chatterjee, convener for the conference, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Chief guest of the conference, Dr. S.J.S. Flora, Associate Director, Defence Research and Development Establishment, Gwalior, Professor K. Sharma, Advisor, the IIS University, Professor M.K. Jain, Dean, Faculty of Arts and Social Science, the IIS University, Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar, Dean, Faculty of Science, the IIS University, Dr. Nidhi Gupta, Organizing Secretary, and all the esteemed invited speakers, participating delegates, and guests in the audience. It is a privilege and honor to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of the IIS University, Jaipur, at the inaugural ceremony of the 3-day International Conference on Biotechnology and Nanotechnology. Nanobiotechnology is a very diverse and unique field which combines conventional device physics with the molecular self-assembly, developing nanoscale material to investigate biomolecules at atomic level. Numerous nanodevices and nanosystems for sequencing single molecule of DNA are now available. An increasing use of nanobiotechnology by the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries is anticipated in future. Nanotechnology will be applied in all stages of drug development, from formulation for optimal delivery to diagnostic applications in clinical trials. Nanomedicine is now within the realm of realism. I am confident that these 3 days will help scientists network and critically encourage and inspire young people into a life of scientific inquiry. Hopefully, this conference will be able to create a roadmap to transform the foundation of diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of disease in future. I'd like to express my deep gratitude to Dr. S.J.S. Flora for so very kindly acceding to our request to deliver the keynote address. Thank you, sir, for your kind presence and insights. Your address, sir, has set the tone for the deliberations that are to take place over the next 3 days. My thanks are due to all the invited speakers for consenting to speak on the upcoming issues on the field of biotechnology and nanotechnology. Thanks are due to all academicians, delegates, and students who have come from far and wide to attend the conference and share their findings. We are gratified to see the diverse participation of young scientists and delegates from several parts of the country. I sincerely hope that your inputs and interactions during the conference will add value and ultimately promote potential applications of nanoparticles for the greater welfare of mankind. The event would not have been possible without the unstinted support and invaluable guidance of Dr. Ashok Gupta, Honorable Vice Chancellor, the IIS University. His guidance throughout has given this 3-day event its present shape. May I take this opportunity to place on record my deep sense of gratitude to Professor Rakhi Gupta, Registrar, the IIS University, for her critical approach towards planning and her keen attention to detail which have helped this conference see the light of day. I also wish to thank Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar, Dean Faculty of Science, the IIS University, for his invaluable guidance at every step of the way. The smooth conduct of the event is possible only with the support, teamwork, and untiring efforts of all the faculty members, student volunteers, research scholars, and the technical and support staff. Thanks to all of them. I am very much thankful to Indian Science Congress Association, Jaipur chapter and Indian Council of Medical Research for their financial support to organize this conference. Lastly, I thank the media persons whose ample coverage of the conference will highlight the importance of this contemporary issue to both the public as well as the scientific fraternity. With the hope that this conference will accomplish all its objectives, I wish it the best. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. With this, we come to the end of the inaugural session. I hope this 3-day international conference will...
Professor Y. Singh.
Thank you.
And Dr. A.C. Banerjee. Thank you, sir. May I now request the chairperson to take over the session. Thank you.
Very good morning once again. Honestly speaking, I was to leave little early, but I thought I cannot resist listening to the talk of three great scientists. I mean, to be honest, I have never heard Dr. Bhalla. Of course, Dr. Yogen Singh I have heard many times, but there are few speakers you cannot resist listening to. And I thought I can delay my departure a little late, and I can listen to these three academicians, come researchers, come scientists. I mean, to be honest, and particularly Dr. Bhalla, I have heard about him, but I have never heard him. So with this small introduction, I will give a brief introduction about Dr. Bhalla. Dr. Bhalla holds Masters in Medical Biochemistry from PGI, Chandigarh, and PhD in Bio Nanotechnology from Punjab University. After graduating, he joined as postdoc in the group of Professor Samori at the University of Bologna in Italy, and later he moved to Montreal to join Dr. Walter Jazubowicz at Concordia University, Canada. Presently, he is a senior scientist at IMTech Chandigarh. At IMTech, he has been interested in small molecular immunodetection and has been an active participant in explosive detection project sponsored by Prime Minister Office. Incidentally, this project in which he has worked in collaboration is one of DRDO project. So this is one reason I thought that I can listen to him before I leave for my hometown. This present research is mainly focused on development of immunosensors, cardiac biomarker, and infectious diseases causing microbes such as Salmonella. He is a permanent associate editor of Bio Nanoscience, which is a Springer publication, and also worked as consultant at NanoShell in USA. With this small introduction, I request Dr. Bhalla to kindly give it.
I was really very much, thanks for the introduction, very kind, encouraging introduction, and also your lecture was very much inspiring for me as a young researcher. Just you focus on one particular molecule, and finally you have it's in clinical trials, and it will most probably see the day. So that's a really very motivating. Your career is a very great motivation for young researchers like me, who can actually work in one particular thing instead of like having a scattered. And also I wish to thank the organizers for having invited me into this conference. So the topic of my presentation is basically nanobio-based detection platforms for human health and well-being. So I'm actually not speaking about the explosive detection in this particular presentation, largely because a lot of things are something which we don't want to discuss in a public platform. So this is basically general presentation, mainly to motivate the students and also teach them a little of what we can do for the diagnostics using nano and bio-based platforms. So basically, this is how my the outlook of my talk. I will I'll introduce the concept of this point of care detection. I'll explain what it is, and so I'll also talk about this aptamers and Salix technology, which right now is in like a lot of people there. World over the labs are focusing on synthetic receptors instead of antibodies and antibodies. So this is basically the Salix. I'll explain to you, the students. And I'll also like to talk about this electrochemical detection, some new tricks like this capacitance-based detection, which is just a charge-based detection. I'll explain how we can realize detection using this basic principle, and some concentrations on enzyme-based electrochemical immunoassay. So this uses basically the same principle as is being used in the common sandwich ELISAs, but this is electrochemical format. So enzyme-free metalloimmunoassays. Metalloimmunoassays is just using the nanoparticles one can realize assay, electrochemical assay without using any enzyme. So it's a metalloimmunoassay is a replacement for enzyme-based assay. And I'll talk about how nanocomposites and nanomaterials can help us in realizing very high sensitivity of detection, and how these materials can help us. So, one new platform I recently published, and I wish to talk about this particular platform as well, which is in fact I wanted to, once you joined, I wanted to see how quickly and without using much of an instrumentation we can realize the assay. So this is one particular thing, approach, which I'd like to speak to you. So basically, like in the idea of point of care detection is to move the diagnostics closer to where the patient is. So we generally give our blood sample and the report comes from the lab. In some cases we can wait, but in another case, let's say if it's a heart attack, it's very important to make the diagnostics before any therapeutic intervention could be made. So today it is possible, there are some lateral test cards. So with a prick of a blood, it's possible to know if the patient had myocardial infarction or it was just some acidity problem. So nowadays, when the human health is improving, and we don't mind buying a card for 400 rupees and just keeping it in the pocket, and if we just had some chest pain, immediately we can come to know by a prick of a blood, by the test, by the lines, which is a qualitative assay basically, that if it's a heart attack or not. So it's very important to make the correct diagnostics before any therapeutic intervention could be made. In some cases, even if wrong diagnosis is made, the patient dies. So it's very important, more important in the case of these extreme emergencies. So this is a lateral flow test card is very common. Everybody knows that pregnancy test card, and nowadays even for the myocardial infarction, these test cards are available and being marketed by the commercial pharmaceutical companies. And this is a successful analytical device which measures the glucose. So these are some of the things which are available in the market, and we want to, in the first place, have a lateral flow test card or something simpler than that for a cardiac. And we also wish to have an analytical device in the future. So this is basically an electrochemical device. So this is basically how the biosensor basically works. So it has a very important, at the heart of the biosensor is the receptor, which is the recognition element. So this particular thing has to recognize the target analyte in the sample. So this is a very important thing. So this could be an antibody in aptamer, and the transducer basically it converts the recognition event which takes place at the sensing element into something useful signal. So transducer, it could be like, let's say, electrode, a cantilever, something like that. So these are the basic components of a electrochemical biosensing device. So let us see what this is the common approach used antibodies. So let's say if it's a peptide or small molecule, in order to have the antibodies in the animal, we conjugate it to make it immunogenic. So this is just a common approach in order to have immunogenic, and a lot of lateral flow test cards nowadays, they use this kind of approach in order to have the antibodies which could be used for the recognition element. So another class of antibodies like IgY, which is like they are more thermal resistant, thermal tolerant, thermal stable antibodies. One can give a lot of antibodies. So those are the benefits of this kind of approach, and this is also being promoted as an alternative because a lot of antibodies, hen daily lays one egg, and from one egg one could extract like milligram levels of antibodies. So this is another one common approach. But the major drawbacks of these antibody-based approaches, especially this molecular antibody-based approach, is the batch-to-batch variation. For that, and people also one has to depend on the animal house if we want antibodies of particular class. So increasingly, people are interested into synthetic receptors or aptamers. So what these aptamers are basically in emerging rivals to antibodies in diagnostics. The aptamer word means basically to fit, and mer is the smallest unit of repeating structure. So aptamers are basically, they are single-stranded folded oligonucleotides that bind to target analyte with high affinity and specificity. So these are basically single-stranded DNA molecules that has the possibility to bind the target analyte in a similar fashion as an antibody. So aptamers bind to target molecule based on structural and charge-based interactions. They are synthetic chemicals, they are not biologicals. Specificity is comparable to antibodies. So these are basically, just for the general knowledge of the students, the benefits we have in using this kind of approach. And they are just generated in the lab, and upscaling is possible because it's just a single strand DNA. We could even even to a company which doesn't has the facility to do the sera and the antibodies extraction, they can realize the diagnostic using this kind of a technology. Cost of manufacturing numbers favorable compared to antibody production, can be chemically modified to enhance their bioavailability and activity. And these aptamers are also very small as compared to antibodies because these are just small sequence of 80 to 100 bases of DNA molecule. So this is basically just an example to give you the glimpse. How we do this. This Salax is a known process, but we do slight modification to realize this. The main thing is that we have used the primers. One is biotin tag, another is FAM tag, fluorescence tag. So fluorescence is basically used for the screening purpose. So we have the antigen bound to the plate, and the fluorescence tag, single-strand DNA molecule, it interacts, and just by the fluorescence reading we could make out whether there was an interaction or not. And the biotin tag is just used for the partitioning purpose. So we separate out the single-strand DNA molecule using this biotin tag by using an avidin. Its affinity with the avidin protein, and as the multiple rounds of exposure to the target bound to the plate are done, and you can see with every screening, every exposure, the number of binder population increases with every screening step, and the binder population is increasing. At the end of that, we do the sequencing of the sequence, and we try to do some more negative positive selections, and that is how it happens basically, and this is a basically well-known approach. So coming to the detection part of it, let's say if we look at the interaction of antibody with an antigen or an aptamer with the antigen molecule, once this interaction happens, there is actually no way any parametric detection or the production of current takes place. So how exactly to realize this detection? So how exactly to know that we had the detection, which is $1 billion question? That's the main theme. So we have to know how exactly whether there was an antigen-antibody interaction occurred or not. So because these people are more interested in parametric current electrochemical detection also, which is the main technology that leads to quantitative detection of the analyte. So there is no way exactly any production of current takes place. So how exactly we realize the detection? These are basically the techniques right now, approaches which are available. So this is just a cartoon picture to show you the probing antigen-antibody interaction which we are interested in, which is the main thing. So basically how we can know whether the antigen-antibody interaction occurred or not. These are basically some of the tricks available to us. Mass-based technology. So basically quartz crystal microbalance is a common thing. Quartz crystal is basically, it has its own resonance frequency, and once we put some mass addition, antigen addition, because of the interaction of antigen and antibody occurs just by changing the mass, change in resonance frequency, which is related to the mass by Chaudhary equation. So one could know how many molecules of the antigen were bound to the antibody which was sitting on the quartz crystal. So this is the approach, and microcantilever is again a hanging beam, just like the beam you see people jumping from in the Olympic Games. They they jump into the swimming pool, but it's a micro version. So it has its own resonance frequency. cantilever has its resonance frequency. Once the interaction takes place, there is a change in resonance frequency. So these are basically the mass-based approach which are available, and they, some are being used, like the QCM, a lot of companies they are marketing to know the interactions. And the best thing about the QCM technology is that you can calculate the exact number of antigen molecules which interacted with the antibody. So these are very fantastic techniques, but not so like they are not like something like a lateral flow test card which you could keep in your pocket. So these mass-based techniques, they are not, and they have certain problems as well. So dielectric like SPR, surface plasmon resonance, BIACOR, everybody is very common. It's a common technique to know the KD, but it's again not so downscalable where you could keep the device in your pocket like that. So increasingly people have been interested in physics behind the antigen-antibody interaction. So what happens is that once this antigen-antibody interaction takes place, there is some like kind of realization of some population of charges developing on the surface or some physics changing. People want to detect by that. That is the state of the art right now. People have been using, you might have heard of this nanowires and nano interdigit electrodes. So these kind of structures, they are made by people to realize this charge-based capacitance measurements. So why exactly we need to stress so much to make these structures so nano? Like you might have, I already know, like people from magazines and newspapers, they know that these kind of structures are being made by scientists. But why exactly do we need to make things so small? Even a micron thing or millimeter kind of a thing can be kept in the pocket sensor, but why exactly we need to make things so small? So coming to that particular answer, why go nano? As Dr. Flora also discussed this matter, exactly why everybody tried to do nanotechnology, but why exactly we want to do push into like go do nanoparticles, and what is the benefit? One should look into that. So I explored that, and my own research in Italy give me the answer to that. So what I did was we used to make these devices starting from 50 nanometer to micron level, and we used to check. So the best efficiency, sensitivity used to come when we check, we have the device structure down to the nano level. So why exactly that used to happen? So this is extensive simulations world over. Like theoretical people, they have made the simulations, not experimentalists. They have come up with this gap plus width rule, and it's a common rule being widely quoted. So the gap plus width rule states that 95% of the current passes below the distance that equals the pitch, which is the width and gap of the interdigit electrode. Since the biomolecular interaction also takes place between 10 to 100 nanometer from the surface of the electrodes, having a pitch in the same dimension can maximize the sensitivity. So if you have to, अगर दूरबीन है तो उसको देखना है चीज को, तो exact focus में लाना पड़ेगा उसको, तभी वो देख पाओगे. अगर आपने कोई मिलीमीटर का स्ट्रक्चर बना लिया तो फिर वो इतनी sensitivity नहीं ला पाओगे. So this rule is actually theoretically simulation से it has been and it has been widely quoted. So that is the answer why we need to make the structure so small. So these, like in the Europe, I was working with the microfabricated electrodes, but microfabrication technology is not so much available like so easily available in India. But we had these microfabricated electrodes there, and this Olivetic, which is an electronics company that was making the electrode for us. So basically, the idea was that we have a lot of sensing spots. So this is basically a stamp size chip, and we have a lot of sensing spots over there. So the idea mainly in this antibody detection is to realize an array. Not exactly just one antibody interaction could give you the answer, but you need to have an array. So some controls are running on some spots. Another spot is, let's say, having the detection for the free markers, and the another spot is having, let's say, bound complexes. So it gives you a totality of picture, and you are also running the experiment in, let's say, multiples. So you generate a composite picture from the array in order to have the precise answer. So that was the state of the art. But back home, like once I came back at IMTech, we didn't have that microfabrication available to us, but we still wanted to do this label-free technology, that charge-based and capacitance-based interaction. We wanted to see that. So what we did was this is basically the principle of what exactly this charge-based interaction is. The idea is to basically to realize a capacitor between the electrode and the solution ions. So this is basically it happens. We have the electrode, and once we dip the electrode into solution, the counter charges, sodium ions, they will come and populate on the surface of the electrode. So basically electrical double layer is developed. And once we immobilize the molecule, the charges, ions, they are pushed further away in the solution, like in this case. So what is happening is you are changing the D value. So the D value is changing. So let's say if you look here, and if you this is basically the charges which sodium ions which are located in the closer to the electrode. Once you immobilize the molecule, it pushes further away in the solution. So there is a change in the D value. So can this give us a detection? That was the question. That was the what capacitance-based detection or the charge-based detection is all about. So let's say another way we put the antibodies. So the D value, the solution ions, they are being further pushed away. So the D value is further, distance is further, so there should be distances inversely related to the capacitance. So once we change the distance, capacitance should decrease. So that was the original principle given by Bergrun and a lot of people. But my actual research tell me that these molecules, the biomolecules, they are not very good efficient displacers. So they don't displace it, but they bring fresh charges. Like let's say a protein which is pI 9.1 and physiological pH you are checking it, it brings a lot of charge onto the surface, but it doesn't really change because of the type of the protein. Let's say some is of the type of one kind of a structure, so they are not very good excellent displacers. And as in the case of a SAM layer, self-assembled monolayer, or which are very perfect at displacing the ions. So the capacitance doesn't exactly decrease, but it may also increase because you are bringing more charges because of the antigen onto the surface. So this is how the antigen comes and it brings a lot of charges. So the capacitance, a lot of charges they are coming in. Just by measuring the capacitance, one could realize the detection. So the detection may be provided by ions charge displacement, but it doesn't exactly happen, which is because they are not antigens, they are not perfectly so uniform. They are not perfect blocks, so that they just displace. But they also bring a lot of charges and they may increase the capacitance also. So this is how, like I once I came back, I started to work. So this is basically, the idea is basically to realize a capacitor. So once this, I did it with troponin I protein. This is tropa is like a biomarker for cardiac. It's a gold standard marker, and it's a like very high charge protein, like PI is 9.2. And so once these like I use these gold nanoparticles, which I use them in a similar configuration as in nanomers and under interdigits. So I didn't have the possibility to make the microfabrication, but I did the same the effect, field strength enhancement. I used them for electrical field enhancement, localized electron field strength enhancement at the surface. So that's why I use these golden particles. So once we add the golden particle, little bit increase in capacitance. Once the antibody, not much of a change. But once they put the protein, which is a very high physiological, at pH 7 I'm checking, and it's a 9.1 protein, bringing a lot of charges. So increase in capacitance, dramatic increase in capacitance. So I'm not exactly giving the statistical picture, but let's say you that I was able to realize something like 0.3 nanogram per ml, which was the which is important from a clinical point of view. But this kind of tricks, they have got a lot of shortcomings as well. It's just in the research domain. It doesn't really, if you take these kind of things into field condition, they won't exactly work so nicely, which I'll show you later. So another case, that was the case of the capacitance. But if you take the cells, in this case I'm taking the malaria infected cells from another group, which is Dr. Washington's group. So he has some monoclonal antibody, he has some surface markers, and I took those antibodies, and this I want to say you that interaction of infected red blood cells with its monoclonal antibody is clearly a case of increase in resistance. So they are not changing the capacitance at all. They are at physiological pH, they are not very high PI, and they are just heavy objects. So once they interact with the electrode, the IRBC, they are creating a lot of the cross traffic, they are changing. So cross talk between the electrolyte in the solution and the electrode, that doesn't take place. So they are just acting as a resistive barrier on the surface. They are not exactly leading to the change in capacitance, which is being shown here. This is basically the impedance plots. So with if I have a lot of impedance change taking place, if the interaction occurs, but if it doesn't occur, there is no change in impedance. So this particular work is actually in consideration in a journal. It's just a fundamental study. So as I told you, we have these impedance plots, and this is the electrical equivalent circuit. So we try to the interaction, we try to visualize it from a equivalent circuit modeling. We try to do to find out this is the impedance change, and this is the various parameters, capacitance, resistance, impedance, constant phase element. So we try to extrapolate all those things, and as you can see, in this case the capacitance is not changing. From 2 to 9, 2 to 1 nanofarad, 2 to 5, it's not changing much of a change. But if you look at the resistance, because it's a big object, cell is a big object, so it acts as a blocker. The kind of blocks the crosstalk between the electrolyte and the electrode. It just acts as a resistive barrier. So it changes drastically the resistance. So exactly we could use it for the sensing, this kind of a concept. So by using this kind of a concept, we were able to detect, like, let's say 10 cells per ml of blood. In fact, it cells. So as I showed you, the major bottleneck in this kind of a technology coming to the market is just the average capacitance drift in time is too large standard deviations of the detection. So it happens like in the lab situation, but if you literally do it 100 times, 200 times, the average drift of capacitance, because it's very delicate phenomena you are dealing, and capacitance is also temperature dependent, humidity dependent, a lot of things, and exactly to bring this kind of thing into the market, still there's a bottleneck. So what exactly comes to the market, I know from the collaboration I had. I was previously working with Piramal, and I had what works exactly, the kind of devices which they have in the market are exactly based on the same old concept. So you have the enzyme over there. So enzyme, in this case they use alkaline phosphatase. The commercial chips like Abbott has the iStat into the market is available. And so they use the alkaline phosphatase. The alkaline phosphatase in this electrochemical acid converts the naphthyl phosphate into electroactive naphthol. So the electroactive naphthol is evaluated, and it's directly related to the presence of the analyte. So that's what works, because the thing is that because this enzyme also acts as a bioregulator, so small phenomena happens, it produces a lot of product over the time. But in the capacitor, that thing is not happening. So this phenomena, it works in ELISA as well, and age-old technique, but it also works in electrochemical format. So all their chips, they are based on this particular concept. So one of my study I did by NAFTA using this particular phenomenon, and we also try to make some changes, like in terms of there is some problem of precipitation of this molecule on electroactive molecule, so you're not able to evaluate it actually so precisely. So some precipitation may also take place, and then the synthesize another alternative substrate, and that kind of things. It's happening in research. So this particular study, I used this particular trick to evaluate the antigen. So another state of the art, what people are thinking into enzyme-free assays, this particular technique we used a gold nanoparticle, and we make it to burst. One gold nanoparticle burst with adding the acid, and one nanoparticle will generate plenty of AU ions. So we evaluate the ions. So this is an enzyme-free strategy. We published it. And basically we just make the nanoparticle to burst, and just like the enzyme, it generates a lot of some products over a time. This just simple bursting concept could generate a lot of metal ions, and that metal ions can be evaluated electrochemically. So this also gives you the best thing about this thing is the sensitivity, and the worst thing about this thing is that making a gold to burst, it needs a lot of harsh acid. It doesn't happen so easily. But if something, let's say laser shot or something, can make it to happen, that is going to work in future. So bursting works because one nanoparticle will burst, a lot of ions will be generated, a lot of sensitivity can be achieved. But the only harsh thing, counter argument against this is you are adding this H. And if you are working, this acid thing can play a lot of spoil spot as well. You need a really harsh acid to burst to convert the AU0 to AU+3. So another thing, these quantum dots, they are very they are just fluorescent nanoparticles. They are just semiconducting nanoparticles. So they also are being used in diagnostics. You can have you can generate them in the lab using the cadmium and telluride. If it's cadmium telluride nanoparticle, they are fluorescent objects. You can label it with the antibody, and you can exactly measure the fluorescence. The advantage is that it has got broad excitation, and you can actually tune the emission. So if you want one particular emission, let's say orange, green, or like that, you can just tune it the way you like. And the other beautiful thing, what we did out of it was that after the optical assay was performed by us, after that we burst this by again adding the acid, and we liberated the cadmium ion. In the previous case, we burst the Au nanoparticle to limit the Au ions. It evaluated the Au ions electrochemically. In this case, we released the cadmium ion, also evaluated so we kind of developed the dual detection approach, which we reported as well. So coming to this, where I want to discuss with you some new happenings, like you have heard of 2010 Andrew Grant claiming the Nobel Prize for Physics for the graphene works. So what basically he did was that he took this graphite, which is basically a pencil, and he used the scotch tape. He was sitting in his office. He just by scotch tape peeling, he at multiple peelings of graphite, he took a small piece of graphite from the surface, did a lot of scotch tape peeling, and eventually he came up with a single layer of carbon atoms, which was called graphene. So that particular thing got him the Nobel Prize, because it's a simple method of having because previously these kind of things, single layer of carbon atoms, nobody could envision it's possible to have in your hands single layer of carbon atoms in your hands, and it opens fantastic opportunities. So it also opens fantastic opportunities for diagnostics also, because they have got very good charge transport. So charge transport is very much required in electrochemical techniques, and they have got also functionality very good. If you do the oxidation of the carbon atoms, you could have carboxyl group on the surface. So carboxyl group could be used for functionalization of antibodies or any other molecule. So a lot of biological possibilities also emerged from there, and a lot of people they published. And another molecule which a lot of nanotechnology people like Dr. Skinner Rao, which is also a single layer, they're working on it. It's exfoliation methods to have the single layer in your hands. On those things they're working. This is again, but the property here of the molybdenum sulfide, which is again a single layer as this. And molybdenum sulfide actually people started to think after immediately for 3-4 years, once they got the Nobel Prize, people were just thinking on graphene based things, and after that also shifted to something thinking about molybdenum sulfide. And basically in molybdenum, in the case of graphene, the properties are fissile chemical functionality, like plastic electron transport. The kind of electron transport you can get, I'll show you, you cannot imagine it because it's a single layer. And molybdenum sulfide, the properties which we used is basically the fluorescent quenching, it acts as a fluorescent quencher, and the other property is that it binds to single-strand DNA. So we thought that how we can use these two properties to make the detection, and these two properties also show how we can use to make the better detection. So this is how graphite can be exfoliated, and you can have just Hamer's method oxidation to exfoliate to have the single layer graphene. So this is the big transmission electron microscopy of the graphene sheets, and basically you can have the functionality because of the oxidation occurring here. So carbon, it becomes COOH because of the reason that you did the oxidation. And basically after we put this sheet onto the electrode, we do the reduction, and this is the reduction step. So basically we are doing electrochemical reduction of these sheets. And as you see, let's say one reduction scan, second reduction scan, third reduction scan, you can see the plastic increase in the charge transfer properties. So we are having the analyte, the ferrocyanide in the solution, and once just by carrying out a reduction scan, we have a dramatic increase in current, and that's just exponential, like the kind of. By the reduction, this graphene is being formed from graphene oxide. So we are just the OH detrimental functionalities we are reducing, and it becomes becoming with every electrochemical reduction, it's becoming graphene, and we are increasing, we are getting the plastic increase in conductivity. So this is just I want to share with you, we were working on this small approaches, how we can make these electrodes out of scratch. So one way is just you have a gold sheet, so we just sputter coat a gold onto a transparency sheet, and then we laser ablate it. So laser ablation is done by people who motorcycle stickers, and those guys have laser ablation techniques. So just by laser ablation, one could have the crude Indian sands. And another way was this company with which we started, they were working on, they wanted us to have a CNT, they were a company who were working on CNT in graphene, and they wanted us to have this kind of cheap electrodes. So just a cardboard or a small paper, and we just print the graphene circuits and the CNT circuits onto it. So these were just our our attempts to have the electrode in our hand in a very simple way, from starting from scratch. So this is about the concept which I was talking, which is the new platform, like we use the molybdenum sulfide. So what happened is that molybdenum sulfide sheets, exfoliated molybdenum sulfide sheets, they have this property that they bind to the single strand DNA. So aptamer is also a single strand DNA until and unless it interacts with its target antigen. After that, the hydrogen bonding potentiality is just occupied by the target antigen. So if we have, let's say, if the molybdenum sulfide is there, and the aptamer, molybdenum sulfide can bind to the aptamer, it also has the quenching property. So if it binds to the aptamer, it just quenches the fluorescence of a fluorescent type aptamer. But if the target antigen, which is a salmonella cell in this case, is present, this salmonella cell occupies it binds to the aptamer, and now this aptamer bases are already occupied, so they are unable to bind to the molybdenum sulfide. So this is basically a concept of own fluorescence. So basically, if we just have non-specific things, we have very less fluorescence. But if the target antigen is present, we have own fluorescence. So this particular concept we just published recently. So this is basically the synthesis of the molybdenum sulfide in the lab. So these are the sheets. This is the actual solution, and we can see. But this particular platform, it didn't give us the exact analytical response, but it's more of a digital response. But still, digital response is that it doesn't give a very good analytical capability. It's not possible for quantitative. But once we add the 10 cells of salmonella, immediately there is a on fluorescence. But after that, there is a little bit of saturation until 10 raised to the power 4 cells, and after that still it gives. So there are basically some reasons which we were able to find out what are the intricacies of this particular method, why it behaved in such a manner, but still journal accepted it because it's a good method for qualitative detection of the cells, and it doesn't even has the cross-reactivity problem. So this is basically the optimization for the concentration which we are going to use. So basically this, I'll finish here. These are basically my collaborators at IMTech, Dr. Suri, Raman Suri, and other lab mates. And at Concordia I had these professors. At EPFL I had this professor Sandro Brara, and currently I'm collaborating with these particular people. So thanks a lot. Thanks.
You all will agree that early and precise detection of a disease is very critical for the treatment and what you call it, indiscriminate use of drugs. And he has very rightly and very precisely has told the new techniques, how biosensors and how nanotechnology can be used for the detection of these early detection methodology. A wonderful lecture, and I do invite few questions from the students. Please.
What is the antigen of the salmonella which binds actually? Because you showed very specific salmonella.
Sir, actually we don't know right now because it was just an aptamer. Okay. So we don't know what the protein is.
So when you decide the aptamer, how do you rule out that it will not bind to any other bacteria or any other pathogen?
Sir, that is just for the negative screening. So just during the screening only you introduce the other proteins as well. So you just take out those fractions which are not interacting.
Yeah. So the only point I wanted to understand was many bacterial surfaces may be very similar. So when we say pathogen, it has to have a specific thing there, and which could be used for.
Let me tell you that we are working on the virulence protein, not the other one. Which are specific to the, they're just like tags, which are specific to the virulence, not the general protein.
Okay. Any other question?
In your sensitivity, what you have shown that initially up to 10 log 4, I see there was more or less same from 10 to 10 raised power 4. why it is so? Because you
Actually, I would suggest you to read my paper page because actually it was just because none of the methods behaves, if it behaves so perfectly, maybe I'll not publish it. So something happened. Actually, this even the most there are some intricacies in that because it behaves so perfectly. But it's just at 10 cells you have got very good sensitivity. So basically the thing is that it could be used for qualitative prediction.
Yeah, because when see the infection and all, because this cell number counts very much. Suppose 10 cells can be low infectious is compared to 10,000 cells. Because when you say 10 log 4, it is 10,000 cells. So in this 10 cell may not cause disease, but 10,000 cell certainly going to cause disease. So that is the thing. The detection, but it is coming more or less same 10 and 10 fluorescent this thing impression. So I think that detection ability from 10 to 10,000 should certainly change, isn't it?
I didn't get even 10 cells can cause the infection.
Yeah, but it depends because sometimes it depends how strain is pathogenic strain and virulence level high and low and all. Because in case of salmonella, the infection rate is 10,000, more than 10,000 cells. When someone consumes salmonella along with food or water, if more than 10,000 cells are there, then we are going to symptomatic disease. But if 10 cells are coming, certainly it is not going to survive inside the gut. So that's the reason.
I think even in diagnostic, if you identify even the less number of cell counts, so if it is pathogen, then it becomes important to think that possibly that it could be due to the even smaller number also is important to work. In some diseases, it is very difficult to if the number of bacteria is very low, especially in TB, we can talk about. It's very difficult. So when you know some bacteria is present, you can implicate that the disease might be. Sorry, I forgot.
Any other question? Yeah, please go ahead.
Dr. Saab, we have come across with so many snake poisoning cases in our laboratory, and the basic idea is that analysis of the blood sample or the skin samples by make use of the antigen-antibody reactions. Whatever you have explained here, by make use of the nano chips or nano sorts of for the early stage analysis, can we have some scope for that? We can identify the protein complex with the venoms or with that of these matters? Can we have some scope? It's a major question for us because it is very difficult to analyze such different sorts of snake poisons. If we have that methodology, it would be very beneficial. So
Maybe we can discuss in work out the modalities.
we can have that chips.
Yeah. So actually, basically, for India, like a scenario, I want because those chips they are mainly microfabricated, and microfabrication labs they are not located. Even SCL was located is in India, but those people now they are becoming ISRO, so they are not open to common researchers who want. So basically, the idea is to have like something like smartphone or something like on paper-based device. Basically, we people are not. We're just trying to have the end goal rather than having like something very fine thing. So the thing is that okay, even if it's a qualitative device, we have that.
We should
even like White Sides, which is the father figure in this kind of work. They have just started to work on like paper-based devices, and so even if you are a small college or like that, I think if you read Whiteside's papers, I think you will get a lot of clues on how to do that, rather than thinking that it cannot be done because you have the chips and all those funny things. It's now open, even with a smartphone, people have started to work. So just even you don't need the detector, just by a small app can give you like what was the pixel index.
Right. We have so many advances like the LCMS, we are detecting the protein complexes and all that, but they are not workable at this era. These are only the things that we can have some ELISA's type sorts or antigen antibody reactions by which we can do so. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Balla. It was a pleasure listening to you and good best wishes for the future. Now I have the honor of inviting another stalwart, Dr. Yogen Singh. listened to him many times. It's a pleasure to listen to his lecture. He has many things to his credit. He got his master's from